This hearing will come to order. Today, the Senate Judiciary Committee will hold a hearing on the nomination of Judge Merrick Garland to be the 86th Attorney General of the United States. Judge Garland, I want to welcome you and your family. I want to welcome you back to the Senate Judiciary Committee. I know this return trip has been a long time in planning, and you're here finally. This will be the Judiciary Committee's first hearing of the 117th Congress. Before I turn to my opening remarks, I'd like to just take a few minutes to make some acknowledgments. I want to welcome my friend, Senator Chuck Grassley, as the committee's ranking member. When I first came on the Senate Judiciary Committee 24 years ago, I was the ranking member on a subcommittee with you, and we dealt with the issue of bankruptcy. Now, Illinois and Iowa sit next to each other, and so do Durbin and Grassley. We have our differences, but Senator Grassley and I have worked together on important legislation over the years, most recently on criminal justice and sentencing reform. I look forward to continuing that work in this Congress. I want to recognize the outgoing chair and ranking member, Senator Lindsey Graham, who will join us remotely this morning, and Senator Dianne Feinstein. Senator Graham, as is true of Senator Grassley, while we don't always agree, has always been a welcome partner on many issues, including one of the most challenging issues, immigration. Senator Feinstein, I want to commend for leading the committee Democrats with grace and resolve over the past 4 years. I know she will continue to be an important voice on this committee on a host of issues, including in her new capacity as the chair of the Human Rights and Laws Subcommittee, which I was proud to chair in past Congresses. I also want to welcome our new committee members who will either be here in person. I see one in person and one probably remote. Senators Padilla and Ossoff on the Democratic side, Senator Cotton on the Republican side. I look forward to working with each of you. There are some historic firsts in the Judiciary Committee this year. Senator Padilla, our new senator from California, will be chairing the subcommittee on immigration, citizenship, border safety. I'm honored that he's the first Latino senator to chair that subcommittee, and we look forward to his leadership. Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey will chair the subcommittee on criminal justice and counterterrorism. He's the first black senator to chair a judiciary subcommittee, and we could not imagine a better choice at the helm of this particular subcommittee. To all of our other members who are returning to serve on the committee, welcome back. I want to thank all the committee members for agreeing to hold this committee hearing and vote on Judge Garland's nomination. It is a great honor to serve on this committee. The Senate established the Judiciary Committee by resolution on December 10, 1816, making it among the very first standing committees of the Senate. This committee has seen many consequential debates and approved many important nominations and landmark legislation. In the committee's history, there has only been one prior Illinois senator to serve as chair, Judge Garland, Lyman Trumbull, who led the committee from 1861 to 1872, and during his term of service was a Democrat, a Republican, a radical Republican, and a Democrat again. He was the most bipartisan senator you can imagine. His tenure was also distinguished by passage of historic legislation, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the Constitution, the Freedmen's Bureau Acts of 1865 and 1866, the Civil Rights Act of 1866. The last of these was introduced by Trumbull and ultimately became the nation's first civil rights law. As chair, Trumbull saw a nation torn apart by original sin, slavery, and widespread violence and injustice that continued even after the 13th Amendment's passage, as African Americans throughout the nation face racism. Our nation is still dealing with the consequences of these injustices. People of color face systemic racism, and we are still working to rid this nation of the horrific legacy of slavery and Jim Crow. This committee can make a difference. We have the jurisdiction and the opportunity to do it through legislation, oversight, and nominations, including this nomination of Merrick Garland to serve as our nation's next Attorney General. There have been few moments in history where the role of Attorney General and the occupant of that post have mattered more. Judge Garland, should you be confirmed, and I have every confidence you will be, you'll oversee a Justice Department at an existential moment. After 4 tumultuous years of intrigue, controversy, and brute political force, the future of the department is clearly in the hands of the next Attorney General. Under Attorney General Sessions and his successor, Bill Barr, the Justice Department literally became an arm of the White House, committed to advancing the interests of President Trump, his family, and his political allies. It came as a little surprise then that the U.S. Department of Justice became the Trump Department of Justice. General Barr stated clearly that he believed the Attorney General was the president's lawyer, not the nation's. And what were the results? Too many in the department's senior roles cast aside the rule of law. Trump appointees in the department sidelined career public servants, from line attorneys to FBI agents, limited their roles, disregarded their nonpartisan input, overriding their professional judgment, and falsely accusing them of being members of the deep state. And the department pursued policies of almost unimaginable proportions, from separating thousands of innocent migrant children from their parents to banning innocent Muslims from traveling to our shores, from defending and even ordering violent crackdowns on peaceful protesters to parroting baseless lies about voter fraud in the lead-up to the 2020 election. The misdeeds of the Trump Justice Department brought this nation to the brink. In fact, as we learned after President Biden's inauguration, a senior official in the Trump Justice Department, Jeffrey Clark, plotted with President Trump for one final stab at the results of the 2020 election. They were thwarted at the last minute by Justice Department attorneys who threatened to resign en masse rather than join their effort. So, Judge Garland, it's no overstatement to say that your nomination is one of the most critical in department history. When I reflect on it, I'm reminded of two previous attorneys general, one a Democrat, the other a Republican, Robert Kennedy, Edward Levy. Kennedy entered office at a time of political turmoil. Although the nation had started down the path towards civil rights, Attorney General Kennedy recognized that equal rights and equal justice under law were still an aspiration for too many people of color in the United States. In June 1863, several years into his tenure as AG, Kennedy testified before the House Judiciary Committee. He said, "The demonstrations of the past few months have only served to point up what thinking Americans have known for years, that this country can no longer abide the moral outrage of racial discrimination." He continued, "If we fail to act promptly and wisely at this crucial point in our history, the ugly forces of disorder and violence will surely rise and multiply throughout the land, and grave doubts will be thrown on the very premise of American democracy." The moral outrage of racial discrimination remains with us today, as do the forces of disorder and violence. And tragically, the Justice Department in the previous administration fanned the flames of discrimination. But a restored Justice Department, a department under new leadership, can and I believe will meet the moment. There are great challenges ahead. The right to vote is under constant assault by those who wish to suppress the voices of communities of color. We have a criminal justice system still in urgent need of reform. And too many Americans, whether because of race, national origin, disability, sexual orientation, or gender identity, face inequality in their daily lives. It is time for the Department of Justice to confront these realities that unfortunately continue to threaten, as Robert Kennedy said, the very premise of American democracy. Judge Garland, when I think of what you face in restoring integrity and independence to the Justice Department, I also think of another one of your predecessors and fellow Chicagoan, Edward Levy, who likewise assumed the office at a time of turmoil. Levi had, of course, been president of the University of Chicago before his nomination to serve as Attorney General for President Ford. And when he came before this committee for his confirmation in 1975, he was asked about removing the Justice Department from the ambit of partisan politics. This is what he said: "I do not believe that the administration of justice should be partisan matter in any sense, but I do not think the cases should be brought to reward people or to punish them for partisan reasons." He continues, "I think it would be a bad thing for the country to believe that the administration of justice was not even-handed because it was in some ways tilted by partisan politics." Why was this question asked? Why was Levy's response so important? Just 2 years earlier, President Nixon had attempted to use the Justice Department as his personal law firm, ordering Elliot Richardson to fire Archibald Cox, the special prosecutor overseeing Watergate. Richardson rightly refused to fire Cox, as did its deputy, William Ruckelshaus, and so each of them were fired in what became known as the Saturday Night Massacre. Richardson and Ruckelshaus refused to act in a way contrary to the rule of law. They refused to put partisan politics and the personal interests of President Nixon above fidelity to the Constitution and the principle of equal justice for all, even those who occupy the White House. In the wake of Nixon's action, the Justice Department faced a reckoning. With the department's legacy still tarnished and public confidence shaken, President Gerald Ford turned to Levy to restore honor, integrity, and independence. Well, Judge Garland, the nation now looks to you to do the same. The public's faith in the Department of Justice has been shaken, the result of department leadership consumed with advancing personal and political interests. In fact, had it not been for several Justice Department attorneys I mentioned earlier threatening to resign this January, President Trump might have gone even further than he did to overturn the election results. And that raises critical questions this committee and you must reckon with. Judge Garland, we're confident we can rebuild the department's once hallowed halls, that you can restore the faith of the American people in the rule of law and deliver equal justice. I want to close by returning to the attempt to overturn the 2020 presidential election. You probably noticed when you came to Capitol Hill how it's changed. You lived most of your life, and I've lived a large part of mine, coming to this Capitol Hill to visit, to work, really to honor the traditions of these buildings. We now have established a perimeter around this building. It stretches for blocks in every direction, and a 10-foot high fence that walls off this Capitol building from the rest of America. At the top of the fence, barbed wire. Inside the fence, we have not only our loyal police force, but men and women of the National Guard from all over the United States, thousands of them, still standing guard over this building. What a commentary on the current state of America that we face today. But it's needed. We were here on January 6th. We lived through it. We were lucky, for most of us, we were not in direct contact with the mob. Others were, and sadly paid a heavy price for it. For months, President Trump spread falsehoods about the election and fraudulent voting, and before a single vote had been cast, he claimed that he could only lose as a result of fraud. Far too many Americans gave credence to these unproven, dangerous claims. We know the result. We saw the attempt to subvert democracy, culminating in the events of January 6th, when this armed mob stormed the Capitol, sought to disrupt the counting of Electoral College votes, violently targeted Congress, our colleagues in the House, our families, even the Vice President, staff, ultimately causing the senseless deaths of Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick and Howard Liebengood and D.C. Police Officer Jeffrey Smith. When you're confirmed, Judge Garland, you, along with the rest of the nation, will continue to grapple with the January 6th attacks, but you'll be in a unique position with a unique responsibility. As the nation's chief law enforcement officer, you'll be tasked with the solemn duty to responsibly investigate the events of that day, to prosecute all of the individuals responsible, and to prevent future attacks driven by hate, inflammatory words, and bizarre conspiracy theories. You know what it's like. You've been there before. You've seen domestic terrorism. You led the investigation, prosecution of the Oklahoma City bombing, and in doing so, made the nation safer and brought some measure of peace and healing to the victims and their families. I'm confident that given this prior experience, you're up to the task the department now faces in the wake of January 6th. In fact, I can think of few people better suited to do it. I look forward to hearing your testimony, but